DE, it'll be a couple minutes before we get started, but we'll start soon. Is there anybody on the other end yet?
Yes, I'm.
I am Gretchen.
For joining us. I'm going to put you on mute for just a couple minutes as we gather here at the SDE.
Okay.
Can anyone hear me? Check.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you.
Here at the SDE, we're still waiting for a few people to gather, and then we'll be with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Good afternoon. This is Kathy Gabi from the SDE. Thank you so much for joining us. I admitted to my team here, I'm a little bit nervous about this. I'm not used to being the lead on these conference calls, so if there are times that we're having technical difficulty, if you'll go ahead and type in the chat box, we've got Elena here taking care of that. So thoughts thing we would do would just be to go around and introduce ourselves here, and then have those of you on the line introduce yourselves as well. And again, I'm Kathy Gabi. I'm the Title I-A coordinator.
I'm Elena Gee. I'm the MTSS coordinator and the director of our state personnel development grant. I'm Jill Matthews, and I'm the family and community engagement coordinator.
I'm Elmira Feather, and I'm federal grants coordinator.
Michelle Clement-Taylor, School Choice Coordinator.
Diane Roberts, English Language Arts Literacy Coordinator.
Shannon Dunstan, Early Childhood and Interagency Coordinator.
Heather Nivey, Regional Bureau of Idaho Coordinator.
Johanna, Indian Education Coordinator.
And who do we have out there?
I'm Alexander Greenfield, special education teacher in the Minidoka Public Schools.
I'm
Gretchen?
Alicia. Oh, sorry.
No, go right ahead.
I'm Alicia Schmidt. I'm a special ed teacher, and I do testing for the Emmett School District.
Gretchen Kinghorn, Title I and ELL Coordinator for Pocatello School District.
I'm Kevin Whitman. I'm the NAEP coordinator, and I'm on the assessment team.
Stacey Ross, Administrator of Federal Programs at Boise School District.
Thank you. We also have Suzanne Peck on this particular group. She is the Title I EL coordinator for CUNA, and she will be a part of this work as well. This is kind of an introduction to this for those of you that are external stakeholders, and those of us that are at the STE have a little bit of familiarity with it, but we're learning together. So hopefully all of you got the handout on the different indicators that we're responsible for, but I'm going to start with, there is another sheet that I sent you today that has just our norms with equity of voice, attentive listening, safety to share perspectives, commitment to the work, and appropriate use of technology. And we're hoping the technology will do well for us. So I thought I'd just start out with an overview of the Every Student Succeeds Act, the state plan. Each state is required to submit a state plan, and so we have to file for a grant for ESSA, and so I have just bulleted the 7 different components there. They're outlined in section 1111 at the beginning of ESSA, which I believe I sent you an electronic copy of that as well. But if you'd like to look at that more in depth, let me know and I can point you in that direction. But basically, the state will develop the state plan, but with timely and meaningful consultation from stakeholders such as yourself. There will be, the limitation says that the consultation will not interfere with timely submission of the plan. We don't have a deadline on submitting the plan yet, but our goal is to have it kind of ready to go by the end of the calendar year. And so we have plenty of time to do this. We can submit a consolidated plan, and so we are just one piece of this plan. It will then undergo peer review and the secretarial approval at the U.S. Department of Ed. There will be a public review period. The plan goes for the duration of the law as it stands now, as long as ESSA is in effect, and that we are to review and revise it as necessary. That's fairly open right now. If there are requirements that we're failing to meet, we'll work with the U.S. Department of Ed to make sure we meet those requirements. And then there's also public comment with that. So that's the first section of the state plan. The second section actually has to do with some writing that other groups are doing around challenging state academic standards, accountability, and exception for recently arrived English learners. So there are various teams within the State Department of Ed that are working on that. Our section then that we've been assigned is most of the other provisions to support teaching and learning. However, if they have to do with the state academic standards or accountability or with EL, then those go to those other subgroups, and then they will feed us the information there. Our work then is to get input on the descriptions and the assurances from you folks. Then we at the SDE will do writing with support of other work group subcommittees within the SDE and outside stakeholders. And then there will be a point that there are other stakeholders that we call our level 2, our feedback stakeholders, that will give us input after that. So as of now, you folks are designated as input stakeholders, but if you would prefer to be a feedback stakeholder after this meeting, simply just send me an email and just that, and we can make that adjustment. Or if you find your time is limited, or perhaps this was different what you thought it might be, or perhaps you're committed on other work group subcommittees and time is limited, I will not be offended, nor will the group, if you need to bow out. But if you'll just keep us posted on that, would appreciate that. Any broad questions up to this point before I actually go into what our work is going to be? Okay.
Yeah.
Hearing?
I'm sorry. Can I be heard right now?
Yes, yep. Go ahead.
You had mentioned the core of this is referencing the assurances and the what? I missed that second term.
Descriptions, and so that's what I'm going to go through next. Is there are some descriptions that we'll actually be writing, and then there's another section that we just are giving our assurance at the state level that we're doing that. And Karen C., our director, has kind of said at this point that perhaps we could just have some documentation to support that, to go along with that. We don't know if the U.S. Department of Ed will ask for that or not, but we thought if we do our research now, then as we get more guidance from the U.S. Department of Ed, hopefully we'll be prepared to go forward.
Thank you.
Karen, I hear that you're on the line. Would you like to say anything?
She might be muted. Yeah. We can't hear her.
Okay, we can't hear her, so maybe she'll join us in a bit. So it says she's talking, but we can't hear her. but also we're signed in under her account, and so it may be that she's not physically present with us right now.
We're signed in.
Yeah, she did have another commitment, but Karen C. is the director for federal programs, and she's coordinating our efforts here. Okay, so if you would look at, if you have access to the Improving Basic Programs handout for the other plan provisions, you will see to the left, you'll see numbers 1111, which is the section number of the ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, and then also you'll see a G, and then you'll see 1A through F. You'll see most of the letters there, but not all, and again, the numbers that are not present are assigned to other subcommittees. So we have A, I'm just going to call it 1A. At the top, we just need to provide a description to the U.S. Department of Ed in the state plan that talks about how they can use funding for early childhood programs. And as part of targeted assistance and school-wide programs, they may use those funds for early childhood programs. The 1C, we need to write a description of how we support local educational agencies to improve school conditions for student learning. 1D, we need to describe how we're going to support LEAs in meeting the needs of students at all levels of schooling, particularly middle school and high school, effective transitions from middle school to high school, and decreasing risk of student dropouts. For 1E, the state will collaborate with designated state agencies responsible for administering state plans to ensure the educational ability of children in foster care. This used to fall under homeless education, but now it falls under Title I. Then 1F, support LEAs, local educational agencies, in the identification, enrollment, attendance, and school stability of homeless children and youth, and that still does fall under that, only now it is Title IX instead of Title X.
Sorry, you said that, quick question, I heard you are unmuted, missed the word that you said. In foster care is no longer under homeless, it is under what?
It is now under Title I.
Thank you.
So we are still responsible for children in foster care, but instead of our homeless education department dealing with that, the Title I will deal with that.
Gotcha.
So those are areas that we will be doing description. We have other subcommittees within the SDE that are working on other portions. For example, there is a homeless children's and youth subcommittee that they will be supporting us with that 1F. So here again, we'll ask for your input. We'll certainly take input that you have on any of these different items, but we'll also have other groups that will be supporting the work with that as well. Then the ones that are designated as 2, 1111G2, and then you'll see D, E, F, G, H, K, L, and M. These are simply assurances. All we are needing to do according to the state plan is to assure the U.S. Department of Ed that we are doing those things. And so that's where we will have internal stakeholder discussion on things that we already do. and then also take ideas from external stakeholders if there are things you're doing in your LEAs that you want to mention, if there are types of support that you want to make sure are included in that state plan. We will take all your input on those things. For example, 2D has to do with the National Assessment of Educational Progress, and so we happen to have Kevin, who is our coordinator, and so he will definitely be involved in this. But if there are other stakeholders that have input on this, then we'll ask you to do so. So I'm just going to briefly go through those. 2D, again, is for NAEP, NAEP. 2E has to do with the state modifying or eliminating state fiscal and accounting barriers so that schools can easily consolidate funds from other federal, state, and local sources to improve educational opportunities and to reduce unnecessary fiscal and accounting requirements. And we have some things already in place. Elmira will be helping us with that. But again, if there are others of you that have input on that, please share that with us.
Quick input here. Mine goes from D to F. I don't see E.
It may be that you have maybe an older copy. I'll make sure I send this out again.
Thank you.
Yes, Michelle.
So Kathy, on this, and I'm thinking about this one and then the next one, if they have specific ideas of things that, hey, this is a barrier for us, or this is something that would be helpful in terms of parent involvement, that's the kind of input that you're looking for. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And there will also be other subgroups working on some of those. For example, there will be a parent involvement subgroup. There will be a physical subgroup. And so we will take the information that we get from this group and then we will pass it on to those appropriate leads to incorporate in their work, and also just to document that that was included in discussion in our group. Michelle already mentioned then 2F has to do with parent and family engagement strategies, and it's also as it pertains to another section of the law, which is 1116, and Jill Matthews will have a subgroup for that. For 2G, with provide least restrictive and burdensome regulations for local education agencies and individual schools. Again, if your LEA, if you see some things that are restrictive or burdensome to you, as Michelle mentioned, please let us know so that we can include that in our discussion. And Mira will be involved with her physical group working with that as well. 2H, and I'm not going to read through the entire item here, but basically we're wanting to help you as LEAs with evidence-based strategies and programs to improve teaching, learning, and schools. And so if you know of groups or areas that you want to make sure that's included in that, again, this part is just an assurance that we're doing that. But if there are particular needs that you have or things that are working well in your educational settings, if you'll share those with us, we're going to try to compile a list per se of those kinds of things. We won't be endorsing particular products or curriculums, but more overall broad evidence-based strategies and programs to improve teaching, learning in schools. 2K has to do with coordinating activities funded under this part with other federal activities. 2L has to do with actually the state monitoring this, and we also have a project management team where the executive team of the SDE will be working with that as well. But if you have suggestions on that. Then 2M, even though it is an assurance, it also has some work with it. Some states already have Title I professional standards for paras. Other states do not. My understanding is Idaho used to for Title I, do not presently. Special ed currently
refers to Title I Secondary Education Act, as in having the AA 32 credit hours for passing the practice.
Okay. So we will be working cooperatively with the special ed department. So the Title I and special ed, we're wanting to do some coordination of our efforts with standards for paraprofessionals so that we feel like there's congruency and coherence across the areas.
Did you say that was a description or assurance?
It is an assurance. However, even though it's an assurance, it does require some work on our end because we have to develop those standards. And so Shannon will be working with that, and I know that Suzanne Peck will be working on that. Okay, she's working on trying to get into this conversation. She is from CUNA, and they currently are using para standards in their district, so she has input on that. We have a paraprofessional on the feedback end of it, but if any of you have either title or special ed or para, both certified, classified staff that you want input from and send it to us, we welcome that. Then on the other pages, it actually describes those assurances. So what the front page is, I took and basically cut and pasted and paraphrased to try to give you the shorter version of that. Hi, Suzanne. Can you hear us?
It didn't work.
Okay. Suzanne, are you there? Okay, Suzanne is still having difficulty accessing us. I may try to just see if she can call into my cell phone, but I don't know if it's going to mess up our technology or not. So I'll have Elena send her my...
Oh, she can hear us.
Oh, okay. She can hear us, but she cannot speak to us. So she may be typing in the text box. Okay. So that's kind of an overview, and so the next steps will be us at the State Department of Ed deciding which of those of us here as internal stakeholders will be the lead or the point person for each one of these provisions, and then you as outside stakeholders, if you could send me in email your thoughts, your questions, those kind of things, and then I would put you in direct contact with whoever the lead person is for that particular provision. So you can either send it as one email or one document if you're okay with it being shared with all the subgroups, but if you prefer for just that particular provision, for example 1A, to get that information, if you'd send them to me separately and indicate that in your email. Okay. I noticed also on Matt McCarter's email address, I left out a C. He should have 2 C's in McCarter. I'm going to ask first if there are people, internal stakeholders that have things to add that I may not have covered yet that are important for the external stakeholders to be aware of. Okay, we're still kind of processing, and we can also communicate with you as well. And after we decide who is going to be involved with which provision, I will provide a list of, for example, if you need to talk to Tina Nayland regarding homeless children and youth, you'll know that that's the contact person there. So now, as external stakeholders, is there more information that would be helpful for you, clarification that's needed, or just feedback at this point that you'd like to give to us?
This is Alicia Schmidt. I was just wondering if maybe it would be possible to create like a Google Doc for each of the provisions, or a whole like the document you sent us as a Word, and then we can just share like comments and questions on a Google Doc. Would that be easier?
I'm seeing head shakes of yes. And so yes, we can definitely look into that. That sounds like a really helpful thing. Do most of you on that end, would Google Docs be a friendly tool for you?
Sure.
Yes, that would work really well.
Okay.
Yes, that'd be great.
I have a definition question again. Excuse me if this is asked and answered. Provisions start at the very beginning. That's everything with the 1, whereas assurances have the 2 before the letter. Is that correct?
Correct. Descriptions are 1s and assurances are 2s.
Okay, so you're saying provisions, that's synonymous. Sorry, you said descriptions, that's synonymous with provisions?
No. Other plan provisions are both descriptions and assurances.
Other plan provisions are both descriptions and assurances.
Yeah, there is a section in the law that's called Other Plan Provisions where these things are listed. And so it states under Other Plan Provisions, if you look, and it's pages 45 through 48 of the ESSA law itself, but if you have the document that I sent you, after the first page that gives you the descriptions and assurances, if you go to the next page, it'll say descriptions and give you all the descriptions, and then say assurances and give you all the assurances. The ones that are in the darker print are ones we are dealing with, and in the lighter print, we are not. Other groups are dealing with those.
Okay. Thank you. So just to repeat that, the black print we are dealing with, the blue print we are not. That's how it looks on my computer.
I would have to pull that up. Let me pull that up because I've got it in black and white.
Okay.
So hang on just a minute and I will look at my copy. Trying to get back there far enough so I can see it.
That's fine. You can just repeat yourself perhaps. The darker we are dealing with, the lighter we are not.
Correct.
Okay. That's
and
fine.
I'll send this out to you again, but I did try to color code it as well to match up then.
Right. And do these all coincide? When I say these, I'm referring to pages 45 to 48. Do they coincide? In other words, are they more detailed explanations of that which we just went over? The 111.
Yes, the pages 45 through 48 are a little more detailed than what you have, especially 1E.
Okay. So more detailed than what we just read, but
correct.
It augments that information. Thank you.
Yes, but they should be on the document that I sent you, and I will send it again after this meeting.
Okay.
They can see your screen, so once you get it up, they can see it.
Okay, and they said if you're on computer mode, you're actually going to be able to see my computer.
I'm just listening.
Some are just on the phone. There we go.
Okay, so those of you that have your computers, on the first page, the green ones are the ones where we'll need descriptions, and then the blue ones are simply the assurances. Then if you go to the next page that says page 45 through 48, I highlighted the word descriptions in green. And yes, the dark ones are the ones that we are dealing with. And notice that E includes both description and assurances under it. And then on the next page has the assurances. And here, those did show up as a dark blue that we'll deal with, and the lighter colors we do not deal with. The previous page was supposed to show up as a dark green, looks like it should be that way.
Okay, so again, so with the descriptions, we are creating the language, whereas with the insurances, we are checking it off. We're showing Uncle Sam that we are meeting that, correct?
Correct, yes. That's my understanding at this point in time. However, on the assurances, there will be some areas that will need some documentation. For example, the paraprofessional qualifications and standards, we will have a document that goes along with that will state what our qualifications and standards are.
So Kathy, for clarification purposes, on all of the assurances, are we going to come up with a list of documents that meet that assurance criteria that is universal to all districts, or districts can say you have to have this or you have to have this, or a combination?
That's a really good question, Shannon. We don't have a lot of guidance yet from the federal government, but what I'm hearing Sharon C., our director, say, if we could have some supporting evidence to back up those assurances, that's a really good point. So external stakeholders, we do want input for all items. That's a really good clarifying point. Anything else that comes to mind for anyone on this call?
So is if I read the document correctly, part of what we're looking for is explaining how we are going to very efficaciously disseminate this information all throughout the state, correct? In other words, a district needs to be able to access something quickly, efficiently, in order to get clarification on what ESA means. Is that right?
I would say not exactly. We already have some of those things in place. For example, for fiscal, for consolidating programs, we already have what's called a consolidated, help me out, Elmira.
Consolidated Federal and State Grant Application, CFSGA.
Okay, so our CFSGA already has a way for districts to tell us how they're going to spend their money. We also have websites for each of our areas which would have information, and so it may be that, for example, you said to disseminate to districts, for example, and I keep going back to the para one because it's going to be one of the larger ones this group is dealing with. After we have the qualifications and standards, those will be posted on our state websites on the areas where paraprofessionals would go to get information on how they would meet their standards and qualifications, and districts would know where they need to go to get that information as well.
Okay, so we are warehousing the information somewhere, but that's really beyond our scope. We're not. This
correct.
Group is not, okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. We are in a lot of ways documenting what we're already doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where LEAs as well, if you see things that we could do better, or as Michelle mentioned earlier, if there are barriers for you that perhaps we're not aware of, or things that we're doing well, or areas that you want to see included in any of these items.
This is Shannon. I think it would also be helpful with our district partners out there if they know of items that they are currently doing in their districts that would show that they are doing any of the 2D through M's. That would be helpful to know if those are district-specific processes or statewide implemented processes for assurances.
And that could also probably apply to the descriptions as well.
So the Google Doc can be set up and sent out where feedback will be put there for each of the descriptions and assurances.
Yeah, so maybe we're even envisioning a separate document for each item.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but then it will also potentially require our district partners to go within their district to ask other people questions in regard to how they might be assuring or could assure these elements.
Yes, please. Please go to others within your districts and even other organizations. They can even be outside educational organizations. I know we've got some university representation here, but yes, you do not have to limit this to your personal feedback, but you are kind of representative of your district, your school, perhaps from a viewpoint or a lens of a professional group.
And Suzanne typed a question in the chat pod. She asked, are you working with other departments at the SBE to coordinate your efforts, such as the para standards, as an example?
Yes, and Suzanne, you may not have been on the call yet at that point, but yes, we are definitely wanting to look at the para standards with Title I and special education. And certification, yes. The para qualifications and standards don't go through certification per se, that they'll definitely want to be aware of them. Any other thoughts that anyone has out there that would be helpful, either as organizing our work or as thoughts, things we haven't thought about that we need to include?
Kathy, will you go through your timeline again? How pressed are we? How often are we going to collaborate?
Timeline per se, this entire group is not going to collaborate as a full group. However, for example, I know that you will be working with Shannon and others who you may wish to draw in to work on the paraprofessional standards, and others out there who may volunteer some input to do that. And so you as a group may choose to have conference calls or FaceTime meetings or Skype meetings or however you choose to do that work if there is a specific group that we say is going to work on that. Others of it is going to be more general and us just feeding feedback into other existing groups. For example, for homeless children and youth, we will feed that information into Tina and her subgroup. As far as getting the plan together, we aren't needing to have it, there is not a set deadline. The executive team has kind of given us from now through December to draft our descriptions and our documents with evidence for both assurances and descriptions between now and the end of the calendar year. So till about the beginning of December. But we'd like to at least probably have most of the feedback or the input, I should say, by probably October-ish. And as things come in, there may be some writing, but we're not looking to be working on this necessarily over the summer because we know that not all of LEA is staffed during the summer. And so it may be that you think about it a little bit now, and then maybe just as you think about things, you can put notes, but then you may not worry about it again till the middle of August or early September. So we have time.
Okay.
Kathy, are we going to have points of contact for different sections, or how are we going to work through that?
Yes, I would like, Johanna, for us here at the SDE to have a contact person for each of these areas. So even though we're using a Google document, we can decide as internal stakeholders which ones would make the most sense for various coordinators and directors to be the lead for those particular items. And then we can send that list out as well to all of the stakeholders. But I really like the Google document idea, but I know sometimes that doesn't work for you, or perhaps you would rather have a phone conversation with someone on something in particular and then decide what you want to send to us in writing. And so if we had a point person for each one of these provisions, that was my thought, that that might be helpful. I'm seeing some yeses on that. Any thoughts on that for external stakeholders? Would that work for you?
Yeah, have a point person at SDE, absolutely.
Okay. Anything else?
We got an invitation that the facts
We're hearing somebody maybe talking to us, but we're not sure. It's very, very faint on our end. So we don't know if it's background conversation or if it's a comment intended for us.
Probably what it sounded like.
Yeah, said it may have been a sound system in somebody's school, because that's possible.
I do have
anything else?
Yes.
Yes.
You sent us the 1965 version of the law, which I infer was the most recent time that the state of Idaho went through a process like this. And you said you wanted us to view this project through that lens. Do you want to talk maybe a little bit more about that?
This is called the ESEA from 1965, but it has been updated several times, and so it is now, we are transitioning to ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act, but it still falls under the ESEA of 1965. But it's been rewritten, and so we are looking at what was rewritten and was signed into law in December.
That was when the first original Secondary Education Act was signed into legislation, was back in the 1960s, but it has been reauthorized, rewritten many times since then and added to. The last time before this section was what they used to call Nickelback, the No Child Left Behind, and this is the new version from that.
Okay, that's about what
That makes sense. I know it's confusing because it's still called, on the main page of the law, it's still called the ESEA of 1965. But if you'll look in there, you'll see new language, and you'll also see some language that says until this date, use this language, and after this date, use this language. Another just point of reference for outside stakeholders that I didn't mention would be the Title I-A website. If you go to that, there is a whole section on ESSA, and there's a frequently asked questions document, and I will include that link in my follow-up email to you as well.
So Kathy, I'm just thinking, trying to frame this. When I go home tonight and talk to my husband, and he's going to say, okay, tell me about your meetings today, so that's one of the regular things we talk about. I'll say, what was the goal or the point? So what you're wanting us to do is look at the old law and what it says for each of these items, and then the new law, and okay, what do we need to change? How do we change it? What do we need to do to meet the new requirements? So for example, I'm thinking, again, I'm using one of the examples that's here. There's a reference to foster care. For the most part, we didn't do anything really with foster care related to Title I before. So now we need to look at that and say, all right, how are we going to meet these new requirements for foster care and ensure that those students are included in the fold the way that they should be, correct?
That one, Michelle, is mainly okay.
I'm not thinking, I don't want specifics to a situation, but you're wanting us to look at the laws and see what's changed and
I would say mainly for these purposes, mainly look at what the new law is, what is here.
Okay, because that statement about with the lens of the old law is what threw me, and I think maybe that's what he's asking about too.
Okay, and I apologize if I said the lens of the old law. I did not mean that. So we are looking through the lens of Title I-A and the ESSA. So we're looking at these as they're written here. If you have knowledge of old to new, that may be helpful to you, but mainly we're saying these things that are here, what are we doing now that support these, and are there things that we need to do that we're not doing that we need to include in order to do this?
My clarifying, this is Shannon, my clarifying question would be, I have knowledge of the paraprofessional standard piece. So do people volunteer to be part of that work group, or are we assigning, so how do we know if I'm doing more than one, if I'm doing one, how is the work going to be delineated out?
Yes. That's something, if you folks want to stay on the line for that discussion, you may. If not, we can have the discussion around the table. That was my hope, that maybe we would be able to do that yet today as our internal group, but you are welcome to listen to that if you wish. If you would rather sign off, that's okay too, and just wait for an email of saying who is assisting with what. That's certainly up to your discretion. Is there anything else clarifying that you need before we move on to that? Okay, so I have my paper ready. If those here at the SDE have particular items that you are saying this falls under my area, then I will put your name there. And
so Stacy, to answer your question, Stacy asked, can we have a Google form that we can indicate which groups we would like to participate in? And I think that's a great idea. I think we'll go ahead, if it's okay with Kathy, because we know your time is valuable. We will go as an internal group and assign ourselves, and then we can start with a Google form where you can then look and see who is where and sign up and indicate where you would like to participate through Kathy.
that would be, yes, that would be fine, and you can certainly have input for as many or as few as you'd wish, but for groups that are going to be doing more work, it may look a little differently.
All right, so we will continue with our work unless there are other questions. We'll end our meeting, and you can look for an email from Kathy with the information she's talked about, and when that Google form will be available for you to start indicating where you want to participate.
Great.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.